You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition. And it lies between the pit of one's fears and the summit of one's knowledge. You are now traveling through a dimension of imagination. You just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of Anthology, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and if this is your first time listening, Anthology is one man's examination of the Twilight Zone as a first-time viewer. Each podcast, I share my first impressions, analysis, and overall thoughts on Rod Serling's iconic series, one episode at a time. However, in this bonus episode series, I'm reviewing Monkey Paw Productions' Twilight Zone reboot on CBS All-Access, hosted by Jordan Peele. You can find more of Anthology as well as full episode archives at anthologypod.com. And if you want to contact me, you can use the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod, tweet me at OVAnthologypod, or send an email to matt@obsessiveviewer.com. So today on the show, I'll be discussing Point of Origin. It's the 8th episode of the Twilight Zone's first season, and it premiered on May 16th, 2019 on CBS All-Access. But before that, I have some notes from previous episodes and some just general notes to go through. So first up, I got some merch from the show, or I purchased a mug, is what I should say. So CBS, their website has some merchandise that you can buy, and I went ahead and bought a coffee mug that just has the Twilight Zone with the spiral and a couple other props kind of scattered throughout it. It looks cool. I don't know. I haven't drank out of it yet, so that remains to be seen how it'll hold up to coffee and tea and whatnot. But I'm excited. I'm excited about it nonetheless. Let's see. So I do have a note from the last bonus episode on Not All Men. So I referenced that the Dr. Romero reference at the beginning is likely a reference to George Romero. But I was listening to Consequence of Sound's, the Fifth Dimension podcast, and they brought up that they had the same thought, obviously, because you would think it's a pretty easy guess to be that it would be a George Romero reference, but they said that it's likely not a Living Dead reference or Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, whatever reference, but it's more likely a nod to The Crazies, which was a movie that George Romero made. That was remade in, I think, the mid-2000s. I want to say maybe Timothy Olyphant was in it. But anyway, the plot summary for The Crazies is the military attempts to contain a man-made combat virus that causes death and permanent insanity in those infected as it overtakes a small Pennsylvania town. I really need to watch that movie, because it sounds right up my alley. But yeah, so that's an interesting connection that I didn't make. So thank you to Consequence of Sounds, the Fifth Dimension podcast. And I also listened to an episode of the Writers Panel podcast with Ben Blacker. That episode featured some of the Twilight Zone writers, including Heather Ann Campbell, Alex Rubens, and Glenn Morgan. And in that episode, since I'm already kind of hovering around Not All Men, that script, kind of some information that I gleaned from the podcast was that one of the early scripts of Not All Men was titled the name of Heather Ann Campbell said that it was just titled The Name of the Town so that people wouldn't know what they were getting into when they watched it. So I kind of just imagined that unless they changed the name of the town throughout the process, that it was titled Newberry. And she did say that there was a version of the script that was just called Male Zombies, which obviously that was never going to be the final title, but that's kind of funny. Some other stuff that I got from the podcast, which I really recommend because it's a really fun interview that they do. But some other things I got was that there was a writer's room at the start of the production, but once episodes got kind of worked out and assigned, it apparently kind of, I don't want to say it dissolved, but from the sound of it just sounded like the writers kind of went their own way and outside of the room. And they did say that they imagined that season 2 at the time of the interview they hadn't been renewed yet, so they were saying like if there is a season 2, which now we know there is a season 2, they said that it'll probably be more ordered and organized. They went into some kind of comparisons to Black Mirror and stuff, so it's interesting stuff there. But I do want to highlight Alex Rubens, who he wrote Blurry Man and The Comedian. And he was talking about the criticism about The Comedian, and I was just like I was so happy to hear him talk about it. He was talking about how like he talked about the whole Second Amendment stuff and everything. He kind of talks about whether or not he would do stuff differently if he could, knowing the feedback that the episode got. But one thing that he said, and I don't have the direct quote, I'm obviously not going to pull audio from another podcast. That's, not cool. So check it out. But he said something to the effect of, the one criticism that he absolutely can't stand is the criticism about how the comedian, the stand-up comedy in The Comedian wasn't funny. And that's something I've been very vocal about how that criticism doesn't work for me either. But he said that he made the comparison that it's similar to like, okay, it's like watching Jaws and saying like, hey, that shark ate people. Or he, like, the one comparison that I really liked was he was like, it's like watching Groundhog Day and saying like, oh, so there was just one day, like they couldn't write other days. I don't know. It was really good, and it kind of pinpointed exactly what I didn't like about the criticism for that episode. So it's cool to see that the writer of the episode reflected my feelings on it. And obviously I had a much bigger stake in the criticism for The Comedian than Alex Rubens did as the writer of the episode. But no, hearing his reaction was pretty cool. It was a very interesting, kind of down to earth moment, like seeing like the person who helped create something, talking about the creative process and about the, criticism surrounding it was refreshing, because it wasn't like just a PR kind of thing, like a PR kind of move. So in that episode of the writers panel, Heather Ann Campbell had some stuff to say as well. She wrote Not All Men, co-wrote with and she co-wrote this. She co-wrote 6 Degrees of Freedom with Glenn Morgan. But she mentioned, first of all, I really liked the way that she talked about the allure of writing for the Twilight Zone. She likened it to being like having a toy box that has a bunch of toys that you can play with, and you can play with them in any context you want, and it can still work out because it still fits within the Twilight Zone. So I really like that analogy and stuff, and she said it in a much better way. But she did have one quote about Not All Men that I wanted to point out here, or I wanted to recite, I guess, here. So she said, "I hope that the feeling that Not All Men evokes isn't that all men are terrifying monsters, rather that to be a woman, like when I was walking up to this podcast, I got a mint out of my bag, and a guy said, 'Don't eat too many of those. You don't know what that'll do to you.' There is a constant navigation for your physical space as a woman that's just sort of that's built from childhood. You're always told that's how it's going to be." So I just thought that was really interesting and unique, and one of the biggest strengths of Not All Men, which is an episode that obviously I am on record as having kind of mixed feelings about, in the end. But there are moments, or there are portions of that episode that are just so beautifully written, perfect empathy machine, I would say, for people watching it from a different perspective. So like as a man watching it, like it put me into the position of a woman and what some of the more tense situations women find themselves in just because of our society. So final thing about the podcast is that she also said that she was inspired by the last scene in Get Out, when when writing the episode, the last scene in Get Out being the police car coming up on a very interesting moment, and how it kind of subverted expectations and stuff. So anyway, check out that podcast. It's the Writers Panel podcast with Ben Blacker. So check that out. Also, just quick shout out to my other podcast, Obsessive Viewer. I recently had one of my co-hosts over there, Kirsten, and I. What we do is we kind of sit down and watch stuff and then talk about them. We'll usually go see a movie or watch TV or whatever, and then record about it. So I kind of subjected her to Not All Men, to get her read on it. I think I mentioned it in the last episode that I was thinking about doing that. So check that out. obsessiveviewer.com/OV284. I believe it's 284. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So it's obsessiveviewer.com/OV284. I'll put a link in the show notes. Check that out. It was a fun conversation. Finally, last piece of news and feedback and everything is I got a very nice message from listener Glenn on Facebook, on the Facebook page. He says, I'm definitely curious to hear your thoughts on the remaining TZ 2019 episodes. While I have been enjoying them more or less, I have found that the series is a little hit and miss. I imagine you will have your work cut out for you with the new Black Mirror having dropped in the last day or so. I ended up watching them last night, and you couldn't get a more diverse selection of stories. All the best, and keep up the fab work. So thank you so much, Glenn, for the kind words and everything. And yeah, I'm very eager to do my Black Mirror bonus review series, and I'm going to get those out very quickly after I get the rest of these Twilight Zone episodes done, and also an update on the possibility of Tiny coming on the show to talk about the Twilight Zone as a wrap-up episode. I think that there's a pretty good chance. He's actually been watching the episodes. We've had some good conversations about it, so I'm eager to, have someone on the podcast to talk to me. Instead of me just talking to you guys. And then final thing, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, and it's a stupid joke, but at my day job, we had the interns for the summer start. Just I keep getting in my head about this. I think I probably talked about it, but I ran into my friend Kirsten, because she works at the same place, she works in HR, giving a tour of the building to the interns when they started, and afterward I texted her and was like, hey, if you want to go ahead and give me the names of everyone that you had on your tour. I'm sure that as soon as I left the elevator that they were asking if that was the Matt Hurt from podcasting. And she just called me an idiot, but so my thought was that I don't know how to articulate it, but basically it's just funny to think that I did tweet this too, but I was just like, yeah, because there's nothing that college kids like more than obviously all of the interns at my workplace are huge fans of Anthology, because there's nothing that college students love more than to listen to a guy in his 30s talk to himself about a 60-year-old science fiction TV show. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because that pops up in my head anytime I talk to the interns or anything at work, because it's silly. So okay, let's get into point of origin, guys. It's midnight. I peeked behind the curtain. I worked long hours the last 2 days. Actually, it ties into this podcast because I took the day off work Wednesday to actually watch Black Mirror. Good batch of episodes. I'm excited to do my reviews of them. Really loved Striking Vipers. Very excited to talk about that one. But yeah. So I've worked extra to make up for the time I missed without taking PTO. So I came home from work, took a nap, and now it is midnight, and I am ready to record. So. All right, enough preamble. Point of origin, episode 8, season 1, Twilight Zone 2019. Plot summary, according to, I think this is from CBS All-Access, a suburban housewife wants to go home, but where and what is home really? This episode stars Jennifer Goodwin as Eve Martin. She's known for her roles in Big Love, and she was also in Walk the Line. But two things I want to highlight from her filmography is she's in the movie Take Me Home Tonight, which is a super fun kind of one night, teen, 20-something, coming of age. Definitely not teenager. It's it's really good. It's got Topher Grace in the 80s, Chris Pratt, Anna Faris, a bunch of people. A lot of fun. So it's called Take Me Home Tonight. Check that out. She is also in she's also in He's Just Not That Into You, which is one of my go-to like rom-coms. It's not that good. And I don't want to say like, oh, it's a guilty pleasure, because I don't feel guilty actually liking it, but it's fun. It's a good movie. Co-starring as William Martin is Toby Levins. He was in one episode of iZombie, 2 episodes of Altered Carbon, and he was in a bunch of Hallmark movies. So cool. As Ana Fuentes is Sabrina Guevara. She has appeared in Tell Me a Story on CBS All-Access, 2 episodes of Snowfall, which has Damson Idris, 3 episodes of Castle Rock, and she's probably best known for appearing in 24 episodes of Gotham. And as Mr. Allendale, who isn't actually given a name in the episode, is James Frain. He plays Sarek in Star Trek Discovery, also on CBS All Access. He was in 8 episodes of Orphan Black, 22 episodes of Gotham, where he played Azrael, which I thought that was interesting. I haven't seen Gotham. I gave it the pilot episode and just couldn't get into it, or wasn't really that intrigued by it, even though I love Batman. So maybe I'll check it out down the road now that it has ended or is about to end. I don't know. But anyway, he's in 22 episodes as Azrael in Gotham. And he was also in 7 episodes of True Detective Season 2, the much maligned Season 2. So that is James Frain. And rounding out the cast is Michael Eklund as Otto. He appeared recently in the movie Cold Pursuit with Liam Neeson, and he has appeared in 19 episodes of Winona Earp on Sci-Fi, 3 episodes of Altered Carbon, 14 episodes of Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, and the thing that I know him from is he appeared in 8 episodes of Bates Motel. If I remember correctly, he played like a kind of a drug lord kind of guy in the town. That's another show I need to go back and revisit it, because I only watched the first 2 seasons. But Bates Motel is a really intriguing concept. I need to go back and revisit it. Writer for this episode was John Griffin, and interestingly enough, this is his only writing credit on IMDb. So I don't really have much information about him, but that's I thought that was interesting, and it's especially like the writer of Replay, I think, has had only a little bit of writing credits on IMDb, and I kind of like that about this show, that it kind of brings a unique voice to the series, I think. And director for this episode was Matthias Herndl. He directed 1 episode of Wayward Pines in 2016, and a 2-part episode of The Order, which I think is on Netflix. And it's worth mentioning he is a very notable cinematographer. He was a director of photography on Motive, on I think a TV show called Motive, Wayward Pines, Legends, and also 15 episodes of Flashpoint, which I think I mentioned in the last episode of the podcast. I'm going through and watching with one of my recurring co-hosts on Obsessive Viewer, Kirsten. It's one of her favorite shows, and Lost is one of my favorite shows, so I'm showing her Lost, she's showing me Flashpoint. We call it Lost Point. Anyway, check that out on Obsessive Viewer. And also, Matthias Herndl is also cinematographer on 6 episodes of this iteration of the Twilight Zone, so that's interesting that they're kind of dipping their toes in directing as well. All right, so let's get into my review of Point of Origin. My initial thoughts on this episode before I started making my notes and everything is that this one was kind of weird. It's another social topic episode, this one dealing with immigration and xenophobia. But kind of similar to Not All Men, I don't think the episode quite landed the social commentary, and I think the episode overall suffered for it. Also, I was really hoping that it would turn out to be a robot episode. I was really hoping that Eve would be a robot or a robot. So I was kind of disappointed there. I kind of, as a small tangent, I really hope that we get like a robot episode next season, because that's one thing that was kind of missing from this season of the Twilight Zone. So, to get into my actual review, of course, I'm going to be spoiling everything about this episode. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out on CBS All-Access and then come back and listen to my review. So, spoiler warnings out of the way, let's dive in. So, the opening shot of the ice cream truck playing the melody for This Land Is My Land is a really nice touch. I didn't notice the melody on my first viewing, like, at all. And I just thought that was kind of clever, in the way it kind of recurs later in the episode. And I didn't notice it, or I didn't notice the name on the truck. Well, I don't think I was supposed to at this point, but it's not really, because it's not really visible there. But it's a cool Easter egg that I'll get to later. So we get Eve is established, Ginnifer Goodwin. She is a super rich white lady, and has no sense of self-awareness. And as Peele mentions in his opening narration, she lives a life of privilege. And it's evident in this opening scene. She's walking around this palatial estate and, or like her like very nice house, or like trying to organize, or I wouldn't even say she's organizing a party. She is telling organizers of a party how she wants it to be organized. And I think she even says that she wants to, she doesn't want to do any of the work or anything. And that's kind of a running theme through her arc through this episode. So, yeah. And also, kind of going back to the ice cream thing, I have this in my notes out of order, but I don't really think I get the ice cream truck thing. Like, I guess it's a front for the government people, I assume. Oh, that's why, because after the scene of her introducing, like, organizing the party, we get another shot of the ice cream truck, and here's where we get just a glimpse of, the brand name of Mr. Dingle's. But I don't really get the ice cream truck thing. Like, it's kind of bizarre. I guess I don't know. It's a front for the government people, I guess. So I don't know. It's not that big of a problem. So after that, we get a scene of Eve just staring out the window with her eyes like kind of glowing blue. And when Anna comes in and asks for a favor, after she gets Eve's attention, Eve just says that she was in another world there. And this is where I was really hoping that she was a robot. That's just what, like I said, it's just what the season was missing. But I kind of got the impression that this could have been, maybe it could have been a more interesting episode if she was a robot, because talking about like even the title Point of Origin just feels like kind of a term for like a robotic, entity or something. So I don't know, but that's not what we got. It's an alternate dimension thing, so fine. So in this scene, Anna asks if her grandson can use Eve's address to get into Matheson Charter School, which is another Richard Matheson reference for this season. And so I really like this scene as an establishment of I guess the dynamics of the family and Anna. 'Cause like by asking if she can use their address, so that her grandson can go to this prestigious school, she's upsetting the status quo and she's subtly challenging, Eve's phony, "you're part of our family" thing. It's a really interesting scene because you can kind of see, and credit goes to the actresses in the scene, but you can really see the wheels turning in Eve's mind as she's like, she wants to keep that. Like, I think her underlying kind of mode is that she feels like, okay, there is a complete, whether she wants to admit it or not, there is a hierarchy in their dynamic. And while she is trying so hard to fake being, to fake the fact that Anna's a part of the family and everything, because she just wants to keep her employee happy, I would say, that challenge of Anna upsetting the status quo is something that kind of really, takes Eve off her guard, I guess. So it's an interesting scene that's done a lot better than I just described it, in a very awkward way. So at that point, like the episode is kind of, propelled forward by the fact that the, kind of faceless, or not faceless, but the, nameless government entity, take Anna away. So, and like they don't identify themselves or show credentials or anything. I thought that was interesting. And it's the same thing that happens later in the episode. I don't know if that was just something for the show to kind of avoid any kind of, avoid anything, but I would assume it's like ICE or whatever. But at this point, we get our first 1015 reference as well. One of the agents says like we've got a 1015, or she's a code 1015 or something like that. And then immediately after that, we get another really, really strong but just maddening scene. So Eve is sitting at a table with all of her friends, and she's embellishing the story of Anna's not abduction, but her arrest. So she says like, oh, they had their guns out, and I said, you cannot come into our house and do this. And she even claims to her friends that like Anna's a part of the family. And it's so phony and so aggravating and so maddening, like I said. And at this point, her friends, chime in, and they all but say that Anna deserved it for being an illegal immigrant. And it's just an interesting establishment of the status quo in our, like a reflection of the status quo in our world, real world as well. Because this is how people talk about immigrants in our society, legal or illegal. It's just like, I don't know. It's just it's kind of a compelling setup for an episode, and I find it really interesting, just the way that the kind of phoniness of the more affluent characters is just really, really well done. So Eve says that they can't find Anna, and they've hired lawyers, and they've tried to find her. And then she does this really melodramatic line where she's like, I just can't believe this is happening to her. And it's just so I think Jennifer Goodwin does a really good job in this episode overall, just showcasing Eve's complete detachment from reality and consequence, even because she's rich, white, and impervious to any kind of law enforcement. She has this sense of entitlement, or this kind of aura of entitlement and privilege that is so well done through Jennifer Goodwin's performance. So I really enjoyed her performance in this episode. And contrast that with Anna, who's been living with this kind of from the perspective of Eve and her peers. Anna's been living with this ticking time bomb of like immigration coming to take her away. It's just an interesting dynamic to present for the episode. Whether or not they really carried that through is something that I'll get to later. But right now, at the establishment of it, it's a pretty strong way to establish it. So the other women start talking about their nannies and housemaids or servants, whatever you want to call them. Actually, I'll go ahead and play a clip. Here's a clip of the women talking about the struggles of being white with nannies.
The thing is that the next person you find is just going to have the same problems.
Right?
Lucy came to us and wanted health insurance, and we're like, do you watch the news? Legal Americans can't get health insurance.
I know. Leet wanted to pay taxes. I said, if you want to be a real American, you try to get out of paying taxes.
Right?
They just don't know how things like that are not helping them. Could expose us and them.
So in this kind of run of a scene, really, I really like that this is showcasing this kind of dehumanizing viewpoint. Like, these women are speaking about human beings, but they boil them down to illegals instead of individuals. And like, that's a really cool thing that'll be reversed later when Eve is herself dehumanized. I just really enjoyed kind of that. But it ends on kind of a weird line, where one of them says they could expose us and them, which I feel like I didn't connect with it, or I didn't really get it. Like I thought for a second, like maybe they were just referring to like tax evasion because they referenced trying to get out of paying taxes. But it almost seems like it almost seems like they're trying to like point to the fact that like all of the affluent people are from another dimension and that they're aware of it, which doesn't mesh with the ending of the episode. So I don't know. It's kind of bizarre. I didn't really get it. I don't know if I was reading too much into it or what, but I don't know. Anyway, after that, Eve has a nightmare of gray skies, and I just want to say that, and I'll say this later, I'm sure as well, but these quick shots of the alternate dimension with the gray skies and everything are just really beautiful, like really well composed shots, and it's the one time. I don't know if I want to commit to saying it's the one time of the entire season, but it's one of the few times in the season where the show has done something and kind of just let it be and didn't overexert it or overdo it. And I really appreciate it for that. So cut to the next morning and we get a couple of cool Easter eggs. So there's this dollhouse. That it says Paris 1889 on the window, and I did not notice this until I was making my notes, and I just happened to pause the frame at this point. But there is this supremely creepy face that's peeking out of the curtain in the dollhouse. Like it's terrifying. Like it's absolutely creepy as hell. And I think it's a reference to an original series episode, but I haven't gotten to it yet. Whatever episode it is that I'm thinking of, I think The Simpsons parodied it in one of their Treehouse of Horror episodes, where it's the one of the early ones where Homer is using the toaster. Homer accidentally starts traveling through time with a toaster. So when he keeps going back and forth, and when he comes back, the world has changed in some way. So when he comes back at one point in the segment, he looks up and he sees that there's a gigantic Bart and Lisa standing over the house, and Bart says, like, that bug looks like Dad. I think that's a reference to an original series Twilight Zone episode. Actually, I'm 100% sure that is because actually it's a funny story. When the new season of the Twilight Zone was starting, they did those little featurettes or videos that they released throughout the lead up to it and after each episode also, where they had like cast talking about the Twilight Zone and what it's like to work on it and everything. And there was one segment where they talked about their favorite episodes from the original series, and one person said basically that episode that The Simpsons was parodying. And I don't remember the title of the episode because I wanted to push it away from my mind because I want to be surprised by that when I get to that episode for the podcast. So please do not correct me or anything, but I think that the face in the dollhouse window was a reference to whatever episode that is that I'll eventually cover on the podcast. Looking forward to that because that's such a creepy idea. But man, I tweeted a picture of this frame of the face in the window. It's haunting. It's legitimately creepy, and it's just cool that it's just like, I mean, it's a blink and you'll miss it thing. The next Easter egg we got was a shot of the cereal box that says it's the name of the cereal is Frosted Can-A-Munch. And it says nutritious chocolatey cereal to serve humans. And I thought that was that's pretty clever. It's cute. It's very cute. Cause it's a reference to Serve Man in season 3 that I'll get to sooner rather than later. Also, this is a good point to mention that I have neglected to mention that throughout the season, the beer brand has been Calumet Lager. Calumet? I think I'm pronouncing that right. Which is a reference to Serve Man as well. Final potential Easter egg is there's a milk carton that is kind of prominently shown for like a few seconds. It has a drawing of a boy on it, but I don't recognize it as anything. Like it could be an original series callback or Easter egg, but I don't know what the connection is. I feel like it's worth mentioning here just because the show kind of made it kind of prominently displayed for at least a few seconds. So at breakfast, one of the girls asks if they can have plantains for breakfast because that's what they have in Guatemala. And like, I feel like that demonstrates how much closer the girls are to Anna than they are to their parents. And I think maybe there's a bigger statement to be made about it being like these, young white girls are being introduced to another culture, and they're taking to it well, without it ending the entire world. But I don't know, I could be stretching there, but I thought that it was an interesting way to showcase how much closer the girls are to Anna than they are to their parents. And William tells them that Anna went back to Guatemala to visit her family, to which one of them says, but we're her family. And I like that Eve deflects that and says, she talks about how, like, since they have the new parents' dinner coming up, that tonight dinner will be Grubhub. And I thought that was kind of funny because she doesn't know how to cook or function without Anna, so they're going to order out. I think, at least, because... So this is, I don't know, unless Grubhub means something else in this context, I just took it to mean that they're going to order out. Yet, it's kind of confusing because, like, immediately after that, she's going grocery shopping. And I don't know, I just thought that was kind of weird. So anyway, she takes the girls to the grocery store. Clearly she's out of her element because she doesn't do this because she has an Anna. So she takes up 2 spots in her giant SUV, and that showcases more of Eve's kind of lack of self-awareness and her overall privilege and everything. And I don't know, that's a bit on the nose because, I don't know, it feels a little bit much. But Jennifer Goodwin really sells it well, because she kind of justifies it like, well, I'm not going to be here long, it's going to be fine. So they pass by Otto, who's the guy that's playing the guitar, and I don't know. It doesn't really connect with me. Otto reappears later, but I don't know. It just feels kind of not out of place, but it just feels like it doesn't really fit for me. So when they're at the checkout, the girls ask for ice cream, and Eve says ice cream is bad. And I thought that was a funny bit of foreshadowing considering the ice cream truck. So I kind of tip my hat to the writers on this episode because that was pretty clever and cool. Even though the ice cream thing doesn't really make sense to me. Oh, I think I just connected. Anyway, I'll get to that later. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting kind of bit of foreshadowing. So Eve has trouble at the checkout counter at the grocery store, and she gets agitated and entitled, despite being in the wrong to an extent. And I like this. I like this for a couple of reasons. One is that she does the whole "I'll take my business elsewhere" shtick, and like I like Jennifer Goodwin's performance here because she is just so. She's so entitled, and she's so entitled, and she's so melodramatic, that like she's kind of getting to a breaking point to an extent. So like she says, like she leans in and almost whispers to the cashier like that she can take her goddamn groceries, and it's so melodramatic, but it's like she's being melodramatic, but she wants to maintain this air of affluence and entitlement she has that's surrounding her. So in order to do that, she has to whisper that. I thought that was a really interesting scene. So she leaves, and there's a note on her window that says, "Your car takes up 2 parking spaces. You must be so much better than me." And man, I love that. Like, if I could get that like on a sticker that I could just put on the windows of people that don't know how to freaking park, I would do that completely because that is so aggravating to me. And I really liked that element of it. And it also, is another situation where Eve is being confronted by her entitlement and her privilege that she has been living comfortably with for her entire adult life, presumably. So at this point, they're surrounded by government types and SUVs, like men in black people, or men in black suits and women in black suits. So one of the girls says, "Mom, just pay for the groceries." And I thought that was so sweet. Like, I like that as not necessarily like comic relief, but I thought that was an interesting line. And like, it was really sweet and kind of cute, but it also is just like, I think that there could be actually a deeper kind of read on that, because throughout the episode, like, William and Eve, they just assume they can never be wrong about anything, or they can never be in the wrong about anything, because they're upstanding citizens who have tons of money that they can just like pay for anything. So clearly in their eyes, they're good people, good law-abiding people. They could never imagine being outside of the law, or like not, being like, they can never imagine being at the mercy of law enforcement or, the government. And it's just funny because, like, the girls saying, like, "Mom, just pay for the groceries," is just like, they don't understand. And I mean, granted, at this point, there's no reason, like, there's no other reason for them to be, surrounded by, government people talking about national security and everything. But it's just funny that, like, they just assume that, like, okay, the one thing that could be potentially taken to being like an illegal thing is just like they left a bunch of groceries at the checkout. It speaks to this family's lack of consequence, or like lack of being at the mercy, like I said, at the mercy of government people. Because like anyone else, and from my perspective, I'd be like, oh my God, like what happened? What's going on? Like, what am I wouldn't immediately go to like, what did I do wrong or whatever, but like, it's just like, what's causing this to come down on me? As opposed to being like, okay, well, clearly you have the wrong person or the wrong something. It's an interesting kind of disconnect between, I guess, classes and society, I guess, because they're just entitled, and they don't, like, the way that the more affluent characters in this episode are being depicted, I should say, is that they are just free of kind of consequence or, consequence, I guess. I don't know, maybe it's a stretch, but anyway, we get Peele's opening narration, which comes as the camera focuses off of the back window of the SUV that has the little stick figures things, which those stick figure things annoy me anyway, but I've made my peace with it. I don't really care. So here's Peele's opening narration for Point of Origin.
Meet Eve Martin, loving mother, devoted wife, active in her community. Eve was raised to view the world from a bubble of comfort, safety, and privilege. But that bubble is about to burst. And when it does, she will find herself within the strange and unfamiliar borders of the Twilight Zone.
Okay, and I'm not going to harp on it, but we get another Meet Eve Martin thing, and it's just, whatever. I do like the content of the actual opening narrations. I just think that there should be some variety with the introduction of them. So anyway, after the opening theme music, we get Eve in a crowded facility, and it's filled with people surrounding her. And I like the way that the show depicts them, because they're all nondescript, out of focus extras, essentially. Like, no one is like pulling attention away from Eve in this moment. It's just very much like Eve is very much in a place that she is unfamiliar with, uncomfortable in, and completely inexperienced in dealing with. And I just really like the way it's visually depicted in this opening scene after the credits. So she meets up with William, and they hug and everything. And like, this is one of the things that I found really interesting, is that the kids have been separated from them. And I think that that's I would say a very tame reference to the families being separated at the border, controversy, crime that's happening, and I think it's ongoing. I don't know, but that's happening. That's been in the news recently, because that's just if you see that on the news, it's like it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying and criminal and just terrible and dehumanizing and everything. And to be honest, I feel like this episode could have hit that a lot harder. And you know, I've been on record talking about how the show kind of hits us over the head with its allegories and its references and stuff. And it's always to no real effect with us. But I think that they could have hit this really hard and made it more about the family being separated and kind of just using that as an allegory for what's going on in our modern age or modern day. So I don't know, but I think it's an interesting reference point, the way it's depicted in any case. So Eve and William are kind of comparing notes, and again, I really find it interesting that there's no like government entity or government body that's identified in this episode. Like when the people surround the SUV and take Eve, they don't identify themselves as government officials. They don't have any kind of identification or anything. It's a weird, I don't know, it's kind of weird. But I don't know. Anyway, so Eve mentions that her credit cards were declined, and William instantly thinks that that's the answer. They're simply victims of identity theft, and there's been a big miscommunication, and it's going to be something that the kids will laugh about later. So then, I think immediately after that, Eve tells him that she told Anna that she could use their address for Matheson Charter School. And okay, this is hilarious to me because it reinforces just how out of touch with reality Eve is. It's comical to me. It's so funny because she legitimately thinks that her allowing her, housekeeper or nanny, whatever the word is, to use their address to get their grandchild into a school is enough to get them forcibly taken away and into custody with her children as well, is separated from her children just because she told Anna that she's allowed to use their address for to get her grandson into school. I thought that was really funny and an interesting way to reinforce how out of touch she is with reality. And also William kind of just assuming that, okay, the reason that they're there is because of identity theft. And it's just immediately okay, well, we're in the bowels of a government agency. But obviously we've done nothing wrong. It's just an interesting kind of, showcase of people who just they don't have a reason to be afraid of law enforcement, government structures or government entities or anything. They just don't have a reason for it. So they just immediately think okay, well, we're not, we're the victims here. It's an interesting peek into, this archetype of our society. So William and Eve are brought into a room where they meet James Frain's character, and it's just, I really like James Frain as an actor. His accent in this episode, I think it's his normal accent, maybe, I don't know, is so strangely intimidating. It gives him that sense of authority, and he's so confident with what he's saying that it's just so, it's very intimidating. He holds this power over people throughout this episode that I really enjoyed his performance here. So William asks why they're being held, and Mr. Allendale, as he's credited, they never, like I said, they never really say his name. He brushes the question aside and confirms that they've been married 6 years and that their daughters are 8 years old. And so at that moment, I'm not great at math, but, I kind of thought that it was I don't know why I thought this, it's so dumb, but I thought that this was going to take on well, you had sex out of wedlock thing, so that's why you're being detained. It's because it's a weird detail, just, I don't know, it's strange to me. So William asks if they need an attorney, and like I really liked this quick back and forth where Allendale's like, this isn't really an attorney thing, and William says, this is America, everything is an attorney thing. So I like that. So Eve comes clean about Matheson Charter School, which is still so funny to me, but like and then when like James Frain's character kind of goads her into it, or kind of lets her roll with that, and she tries to bribe him. And I really like how the Martins as characters, like their answer to everything is lawyers and money. They don't see the situation as anything serious because they've never been in legal trouble before. And not even that, they can't fathom a situation where they could potentially slip through the cracks of the legal system, because everything can be solved with their wealth. And it's that's a sense of entitlement. Like, the word privilege is thrown around so much, and it's become like a buzzword and everything, but like, this is a good depiction of people exercising their privilege, or trying to exercise their privilege. And it's a really interesting way to showcase that in the Twilight Zone. So they kind of try to get more questions, but Allendale says like, well, it's best not to discuss this in front of the girls. And that's when they bring in the kids. And so he mentions that government is inefficient and there was no reason to drag all of you there. So they're happy. They're like, oh, okay, we're going to go. But Eve is still going to be detained for further evaluation. So that was an interesting kind of end of the act, I guess. So Eve is processed, and she passes by Otto mopping a floor, whistling a particularly haunting tune. And I don't know if that whistling is a reference to anything, but it's eerie nonetheless. But I want to mention that Eve being processed is like, it's very impersonal, very dehumanizing and everything. And I just really like the way that it's showcased there. So Eve is in a room with dozens of detainees, all dressed in the same orange jumpsuit as if they're prisoners, and she finds in the crowd Anna. And now, okay, so I'm back and forth on this scene. Eve does the whole, oh my god, I didn't know they would take you to a place like this, and Anna calls her out on her BS. And here's a clip of their exchange.
I am so sorry. I had no idea they would take you to a place like this.
Yes, you did. You knew. Where did you think they would take us? To the Four Seasons? When it was just on the TV, you could turn it off or change the channel.
I assumed they would deport you back to Mexico.
I'm from Zacapa. It is in Guatemala. They fail. Tell me, what are the names of my children? When someone is a part of your family, do you know their names?
So on one hand, I like the bluntness of it. Eve deserves to hear this. Like, Anna just destroys her, and I'm totally there with her in this scene. On the other hand, like a lot of this season is just a bit heavy-handed, and part of me wonders what the episode would be like if Anna wasn't in it, which maybe sounds bad, but like, what if we were left to make the still probably heavy-handed, albeit, connection to immigration, if it was just Eve experiencing it? Like, if the episode was just solely this, very affluent character experiencing, the dehumanizing kind of, situation she finds herself in without having the kind of notion of immigration and deportation and everything directly like mirrored by her maid's situation as well. I just think it could have been a more interesting episode if we were left to make that connection and kind of see it from a completely different perspective. But we didn't get that, so that's fine. So Anna says that they come from the same place and that she's known for a while. And I don't know. I don't know. So are they both from the alternate dimension? Like, this isn't followed through, or it isn't paid off really at all. And And it's where the episode kind of takes a strange turn. Like, Anna leads Eve to a secret room where she meets Otto, who guides her to Idea, I can't remember how to pronounce her name. And it's just, it takes such a strange turn. Like, Otto tells Eve to follow him, and he even says, like, you don't trust me only because I don't look like you, but we're the same. And I don't really understand that, honestly. Like, can he see their true forms? Do they have true forms? Or is he just speaking? I don't know. I'm at a loss there. It felt out of place. So he guides her to Idea, and like, he says, like, now you're going to think she's speaking English. Only people like us understand. So I guess that answers the question that he is one of them. So I don't know. So Eve meets Idea. And she says, it's so good to see you again, Eve. I see you don't remember who you are. And so I want to say, first and foremost, that this scene, I'll go ahead and play a clip. I'll go ahead and play a clip from this scene. Here's a clip from this scene of Point of Origin.
The people here want to send us back. But this is our home now. We love our home. We add to our home. We can't go back home. We're already here. This place is ours now, too, not just theirs.
So, at this moment, I got a real strong vibe off this scene of the After Hours from season 1 of the original series, and also from the 1980s remake, or reboot. And frankly, it would have been, I don't know, maybe I'm going to put my foot in my mouth, but frankly, it would be kind of cool to see that episode, specifically the After Hours, revisited in this new series. But I don't know if we really ever will. Especially with just 10 episode seasons. I don't think they can afford to do riffs on original series episodes, multiple times. And I don't think the After Hours really rates high enough to garner a riff like the way that Nightmare at 20,000 Feet did. So, Idea's voice, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but anyway, her voice distorts like Stephen Young's does in A Traveler, and Phil's does in Not All Men. And honestly, at this point, that effect is just kind of overused, and I'm kind of done with it. Like, I feel like they don't necessarily need to keep doing that. So the line of dialogue where she says, so many afraid to see if a blue sky was possible instead of the gray skies we lived under. I feel like the line, instead of the gray skies we lived under, was added later, like in post. And I kind of wish that was more ambiguous itself. Like, was that added line of instead of the gray skies we lived under even necessary? Because I kind of feel like that's holding our hand a little bit too much. Like, I kind of like the mystery of it. Like, this whole idea of like these people from another dimension, and like, we don't, like, granted, it's different enough, or it's ambiguous enough that we still don't know anything about it really. But I just kind of like the idea that, like, to see if a blue sky was possible. I kind of like the idea of us leaving it there, but it's a minor quibble I have with the episode there. So I will say, aside from nitpicking and everything, that I am honestly relieved that this episode wasn't about aliens. Like, the whole idea of alternate dimension pilgrims is fine by me. But for now, I'm kind of just over aliens in this new Twilight Zone series. Yeah, so I'm glad it didn't go that route. So Idea tells Eve that they want to send them all back, but this is our home now, which, I don't know. Okay, this is going to be kind of tricky, but I kind of think that in the grand scheme of things, this episode is presenting its story about how we should just, like, share the land with people. Like, it's not, like, the whole idea of, like, this land is your land, this land is my land, all that. Like, I feel like that is what the episode is about. Like, coexisting with people, like, not being intolerant of other people's you know, don't gatekeep the country. So, I don't know. I feel like that's what it's kind of getting at, but I don't know though, because the tone that Idea has in the scene where she says that, this is our home now. It's not, it's our home now too. It feels just vaguely threatening. Like, I don't know. There's something to be said about them living in peace in our dimension and prospering as well. Like, maybe that's the underlying message, that the government entity doesn't want Eve in their dimension simply because she is prospering despite not belonging in our dimension. Not belonging in quotes. But I just feel like the kind of idea of like, okay, well, this is our home too, just feels kind of weirdly threatening in a sense. I don't know. Maybe I'm misreading it. Maybe I'm off base, but, or maybe I'm not clear enough in my, I don't even know if I'd say criticism of it, but it just feels kind of off. So, I don't know. So anyway, I kind of feel like there's this, something of an inconsistency in the subtext of this episode. So, like I said, this is going to be tricky. So, Eve doesn't remember who she is or where she came from. She has nightmares of her past life in the other dimension as a little girl who is living desperately in a world with gray skies. Maybe there was a nuclear holocaust there. Maybe. I don't know. But as an allegory for immigration and xenophobia and deportation and everything, is it making the point that it thinks it's making? Because I think there's a read of the episode where Eve is an immigrant who has assimilated so fully into her new home's culture that she doesn't even know who she is or where she came from. And isn't that like kind of a mixed message? Like, shouldn't that be a darker and more punishing backstory? Like, she sacrificed who she is to succeed in a new world, and by forsaking her identity, she lost what made her who she is. And maybe that's secretly the point of the episode, but if it is, it's just not illustrated clearly. And frankly, I think that that's a more interesting story path to take the character down, because I think that that idea of an identity crisis is more compelling than the class system swap kind of story we get. Maybe not even swap, but inversion, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. So there's the government people find them, and Eve is strapped to a device. And Jennifer Goodwin becomes more perturbed and stern with Allendale in this, and I kind of feel like that doesn't really fit well. Like, I don't know, she's kind of, I don't know, there's a line she says early that's doesn't really mesh well with me. Like, well, I like it. It kind of feels like a quip when that character shouldn't be making quips. I don't remember the exact line offhand, but it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So at this moment, I feel like there is kind of an issue with the narrative or the way that the narrative is told through the visuals. So I think that there's supposed to be a montage of her in a cell. It's kind of confusing because we see her strapped to the device and then doing jumping jacks in her cell, but we don't see Allendale use the device or anything for like a couple of scenes. It kind of alternates back and forth. So I think we're supposed to think that time is passing, like that there have been days that have passed where she's strapped to the device and he's asking her questions that she's not answering. Cut to her in her cell for like a night, and then the next day she's in it. But I didn't get the sense that there was any passage of time. Like, it feels like the questions are happening at the same time. So I don't get the impression that time is passing at all, and it just made it kind of confusing for me. So Allendale asks Eve questions about alternate dimensions, and I like James Frain here. Like, he's very intimidating, like I said, and he's very in control. Like, he's very, he's just very, I've used this word before, but he's very commanding in his role here. Like, he's very much just focused on, getting the answers, but he's intimidating. He's not necessarily stressed or anything. He's got this cockiness to him that he's going to get the answers that he needs. Yeah, so they put the headset on her, and obviously it's the design from the Faces in Eye of the Beholder, which I thought was kind of cool. And that's when Allendale gives us this exposition dump explaining pilgrims from another dimension that came to ours looking for a better life. And something about it just rings kind of false to me. Like, he mentions that the pilgrims were looking for a better life, and I feel like someone who is in his position, like I don't know, maybe I'm being, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I feel like someone in his position who is actively seeking out these pilgrims with the express purpose of taking their lives away and taking them away from, their life, essentially. I kind of feel like there would have to be some kind of weird justification for that. Like I feel like he wouldn't admit that the pilgrims were looking for a better life, because in those circumstances, it feels like there's like some mental gymnastics that have to be done to justify, frankly, abhorrent behavior. Like the idea of like separating families at the border and putting them in cages and everything. Like that's horrific behavior. And I don't think that people that are doing that, or like people who make it their job to, take people from their homes and deport them for being illegal immigrants and everything. I don't think they're doing that thinking like, oh, they just came here for a better life. Like it's a weird kind of contrast to the actions versus like the statements of it. I feel like there's more mental hoops that have to be done, because I think that in order to do something like that, people have to convince themselves that they're in the right. And like by admitting that these individuals are searching for a better life is kind of not conducive to justifying their behavior. So I don't know. Anyway, so Eve, like he does something, Allendale does something. I think he like puts something in her back, and Eve passes out and wakes up and is being discharged. And I kind of wonder, like this felt like it was a dream sequence, and it kind of felt like maybe it was more her happy place. But I think that it's kind of confirmed later that it's really just a tactic to get the truth. So the doctor tells her your test came back negative conclusively, and like I don't know. Again, I just kind of wondered if it was supposed to be like a dream sequence or an implant. But I think it's, obviously it's revealed later that it's a ploy. But there's a cute callback to the Grubhub thing, because the girls say that they made her dinner using Grubhub. And I don't know if Grubhub is supposed to be like a sponsor of the season or something, but I thought that it's an interesting kind of thing. It's a cute callback. So at this point, Eve confides in William, and that's when Allendale gets his confirmation. Like she talks about how they were showing her nightmares, and she can't understand how they can show her nightmares, and that's what makes her think that maybe she is this other from this other dimension. And I think at this point there's a close up of a doll, because it's flashing back to the kind of gray world. And I don't remember. I don't know if that's a Talkie Tina doll or not, but it may be. And again, I have to say the flashes to the other dimension in like black and white look really good. I really like that. So Eve realizing the truth, just as, William morphs into Allendale and says like, oh, I found you or whatever. Really freaky, really cool. I like the way that scene was handled. So we kind of jump back to the facility, and Eve is back in her cell, and she hears a knock at the door. I think it's Otto, but I can't really tell. Says they're saying you have money, and so this is where the episode kind of transitions and goes the full like coyote route. So she's going to be smuggled out of the facility and be, freed. And so Eve tells him that Anna has to come too. And I feel like this shows growth for Eve. I think she's gained perspective, she's gained empathy and everything. So she wants to, save Anna as well. And I like that. I like that piece of characterization. So, I guess later, I think that there was a cut. The doctor opens the door, has her get in a cart with a dead body. Not very glamorous or anything. She's very, she kind of turns up her nose at it, but she does it. So the doctor rolls the cart down the hall, whistling that creepy melody again. So there's a woman who stops him and wants to poke the dead bodies, I think. Like, it's weird. It's so weird. I like that. I just didn't get. I thought that was kind of weird. Like 'cause she kind of points to Eve and like she's going to like poke and prod at a dead body, and it's just weird. And the doctor says if you need to do that, you'll want to put gloves on because they all died shitting blood. And I don't know, just the way that he has this creepy smile when he says it, like his read of the line, they all died shitting blood, is like so gleeful and weird. And in my notes I have that quote, and I have they all died shitting blood, and I put a little smiley emoticon next to it. So yeah, anyway, so she gets Eve is smuggled back into kind of Gen Pop in a sense, and I think at this point she reunites with Anna, and there are a few steps to the escape, and this kind of makes the episode feel kind of long. So like he's saying like, okay, well, you need to use the code for the door. It's 10:15. You have to run through the yard to the fence. You need to really like run like hell. And all this is, we're seeing this as he's describing it. So there's some economic use of time here, but there's a shot of the two guards eating ice cream cones that seemed weird and out of place, but I think that signals that like, okay, the ice cream truck is involved in it. Like the ice cream truck and ice cream truck drivers is in on it. So that's fine, I guess, but it just seemed kind of goofy. So they make it to the driver on the main road, and it's the ice cream truck, and Anna doesn't trust it, and she bails, and she says she's done this before, she knows not to take risks, and she leaves. And Eve gets into the truck. And I don't know, that's the last we see of Anna, and we're left like, what happened to her? I don't know what happened to her. There's no resolution to that, and I feel like that is, that makes it not really work for me that well. So I don't know. And it just felt also just kind of, I didn't follow along with Anna's rationale that she can't, since she's done this before, she can't, she knows not to trust people. But I guess she was getting a bad vibe off of the truck, and it's right. She was right in this, but I didn't really follow the steps of her to do that. It felt more like she was servicing the plot of the episode rather than the character actually having legitimate reasons for not trusting it. So I don't know. I don't know. It's whatever. So this is the part where we get a very clear shot of the ice cream truck and Mr. Dingle's ice cream, whatever the brand, the full title is, but it's Mr. Dingle's, reference to Mr. Dingle the Strong from season 2 of the original series, Twilight Zone. And yeah, so Eve gets back home, she runs inside, and William doesn't want her there because she's not herself anymore. She's one of them. And it's a strange turn. Cause she's saying we need to go right now. And like I said, it's a strange turn. My rationale for it is that maybe in the interim, the truth has come out about the alternate dimensions, and Americans as a whole, including William, just instinctively mistrust them. Maybe that's what they're going for there, because it's a very, very sharp turn for William to just disown Eve entirely. Or maybe another read of that is that maybe it's just that William doesn't want to put his family on the run. He values his status in life more than his marriage and more than Eve. But again, I don't think the episode communicates it well enough there. So Allendale arrives, and this happens. I'll play a clip here from this moment in the episode.
Eve.
Get out of my home!
No. You leave mine.
No. Take me back there. This is my home. This is my home. I'm home.
And I don't know. I like James Frain's read of the line that, no, you get out of my, it's almost cartoonish in terms of its villainy, but it works. I don't know. He sells it well. I kind of like it. So The episode ends with Eve being dragged, kicking and screaming, into the black SUV, yelling for help from onlookers who just stare and do nothing. It's a pretty powerful statement, I guess, and it's just an interesting viewpoint, because from the perspective of the onlookers, she is she's an outsider. She's an illegal immigrant. She's been an illegal immigrant here. And also, I kind of wonder if, because the women that she was talking about Anna to early in the episode are part of the onlookers, and I kind of wonder if that's the connection that they're making, that they are all from the alternate dimension, and they're not saying anything because they want to preserve their way of life. And if that means that one of their own, or one of the people that are like them, gets taken away and their life completely shattered, but they can preserve theirs, maybe that's why they don't say anything or do anything to help. I don't know. That's a stretch, because I feel like the episode doesn't really stick its landing in terms of message quite that well in this episode. But overall, I think the episode, despite some faults here and there, it does a solid job of putting the audience into the perspective of Eve and switching the theme of immigration and xenophobia around, because it is, because like the episode starts with a Guatemalan housekeeper being taken away by what appear to be immigration officers, and it ends with a white affluent woman experiencing the same thing. And it's an interesting way to kind of put the audience into the perspective of Eve. And I think that that's one of the things that this season as a whole has really excelled at, is taking a minority perspective and putting the audience into that perspective. I think that's been one of the strengths of the season as a whole, and it's no different here. But like I said, I just don't think it really came together at the end the way that I would have liked it to. So we get Peele's closing narration, where he says that we're all immigrants from somewhere. Here's his closing narration.
We are all immigrants from somewhere, be it another city, another country, or another dimension. As a child, Eve Martin escaped to what should have been a better world, a world where the skies are blue. But now those skies have darkened, and the land below them is a place she is no longer welcome. For Eve Martin, there is no passport to be stamped for passage out of the Twilight Zone.
And it's good. I like his closing narration here. It kind of ties everything together in a way that the narrative itself couldn't really reconcile it thematically, I don't think. But overall, it was a strong enough finish. We see him eating an ice cream cone, and I thought that was pretty funny. It was kind of weird. Also, just a minor nitpick, but like it feels like that's a kind of a green screen shot, like he's inserted into it and it was filmed separately. I wouldn't really bring that up or nitpick that point, but it reminded me of what I've seen of, vaguely what I've seen of, the 2002 series with Forrest Whitaker. Like they did the episodes that I saw, like he was kind of just very sloppily paced into the episodes for his opening narration, and I kind of feel like they did that here. It's 2019, like the visual effects look a lot better, but it still felt a little strange to me, or a little off. So so overall that's Point of Origin. I thought it was okay. It's kind of a middle of the road episode for me, in the context of the season as a whole. It was okay, but I feel like there are strengths and there are strengths and weaknesses throughout the episode. And where there are strengths, is where the episode kind of really works the best, which is the definition of a strength. That's Point of Origin. Next on the podcast, I'm going to be reviewing, on the main feed, which is the same feed, but it's the main episodes. I'm going to be reviewing the Rip Van Winkle Caper, and then, I'm going to move right along to the next bonus episode too. The next episode from the new series is The Blue Scorpion, which I'm really excited about because, peek behind the curtain, I've broken my rule. Since I've fallen behind on these bonus reviews, I went ahead and watched all the episodes, and I'm very excited to talk about these last 2 episodes. Very good stuff there, and very interesting stuff that will be fun to review. So yeah, I'm still hoping that I can get Tiny on for a season wrap-up episode. But yeah, those are coming, and then right after that, Black Mirror Season 5. So yeah, so that'll do it for this episode of Anthology, and yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. Let me know what you thought of Point of Origin and my reviews and everything, and I'll see you next time.
Anthology is edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. For a full archive of our episodes, go to anthologypod.com/archive. You can also like the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod and follow the show on Twitter at OVAnthologyPod. If you enjoy the show, please take a couple minutes to leave us a rating and a quick review on Apple Podcasts. This is the easiest way to support what we do, and all it costs is a little bit of your time. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can make a PayPal donation at anthologypod.com/donate or support us on Patreon for recurring donations and access to commentary tracks and B-roll audio recorded exclusively for patrons at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Every donation goes toward paying the fees to keep the podcast running and is greatly appreciated. Official Anthology merch, including shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more, can be found in the Obsessive Viewers TeePublic store. You can find a link to the store in the show notes of this episode and at anthologypod.com/donate. Or you can simply search for Obsessive Viewer at teepublic.com. For information about the Obsessive Viewers annual live event showcasing short horror films from local filmmakers, check out shocktoberinirvington.com. And for an archive of all our events, as well as news about potential future events, head over to obsessiveviewer.com/live. For more podcast content, you can find our flagship movie and TV review and discussion show, The Obsessive Viewer Podcast, at obsessiveviewer.com, and on Twitter at obsessiveviewer. You can also find Tower Junkies, a podcast where Matt and co-host Tiny share their love of all things Stephen King and his magnum opus, The Dark Tower series, over at TowerJunkiesPod.com and at TowerJunkiesPod on Twitter. And finally, check out The Secular Perspective, Tiny's side project podcast, which tackles current events and life's big questions from the perspective of secular hosts Chad and Amanda at thesecularperspective.com. Bumper music for this podcast comes courtesy of As Good As It Gets, which can be found at facebook.com/asgoodasitgetsband. You can also find As Good As It Gets music on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Kitty!